Carlo Falahiatu, good evening and welcome to tonight's bulletin of BCN News. Leading the news tonight, on Tuesday evening this week, the government announced through social media the shift and downgrade from alert level code yellow to alert code blue after 2 months of staying in yellow alert level. The government, though, is warning and encouraging people to stay vigilant should there be any further changes to alert levels in the coming days. The decision to downgrade back to Code Blue was made on Tuesday after day one testing of passengers from Monday's flight detected 0 cases, and the one person who was in isolation last week was cleared on Tuesday afternoon. The return to alert level blue ends 2 months of the island living in alert yellow, which started on the 30th of July. The government is, though, reminding people not to be complacent and to always be vigilant and listen out for any alert level changes which may take place very quickly. In the meantime, continue to wash your hands regularly, and if you're not feeling well, wear your mask and get an RAT or rapid antigen test done just to be certain. And continuing with the government's aspirations to expand diplomatic relations, over the weekend, Premier Honourable Dalton Taghilangi and the President of the Republic of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., signed a joint communique establishing diplomatic relations between the two countries. Premier Dalton Taghilangi is in the Philippines for the Asian Development Bank Governors meeting and is accompanied by his staff and the Secretary of Government, Pileni Talangi. The communique expresses the desire of both the Philippines and Niue to develop friendly relations and cooperations on the basis of the principles of mutual respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, non-aggression, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, equality, mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence. Both countries also agree to exchange representatives as soon as practicable and to provide the necessary assistance for the performance by the other's representatives of their functions in accordance with international practice. The President of the Philippines is optimistic that stronger cooperation between Niue and the Philippines will lead to a better future for the people of the two countries. Honourable Dalton Taghilangi thanked President Marcos and his government for the warm welcome and generous hospitality. He further expressed that the Philippines, or the Filipino nationals in Niue, are involved in key social and economic development sectors on the island and are key contributing members of the community. And talo exporter Havaka Niue Limited has responded to concerns raised by some local growers that they had not been paid for their last consignment of talo to New Zealand several months ago. Brad Ikinapule told BCN News that he takes full responsibility for what happened and that he is doing everything he can to pay what is owed to the growers. Here's more on that story. Brad Ikinapule told BCN News that they are struggling to pay the growers due to the downturn in the demand for the Niue talo in the Auckland market, something he said they had anticipated, but not to the extent that they would still have surplus of supply. Brad Ikinapule said that a key contributing factor to the situation that Havaka finds itself in was the partnership between the Government Department, Agriculture, Forestry and Fishery and shop exports.
So it's only the last consignment that went down. They went down to Auckland that we are struggling, but I knew that. We knew that once the government went into partnership with shop exports, that it was going to slow the sales down. So in my efforts to try and keep everybody happy was to look for the bigger markets, because Niue is not that big. So I approached the Samoan markets guy. And so they decided they were going to help take some of the taros, because to be honest, the Niuean buyers in New Zealand had slowed down somewhat, but I had anticipated that eventually it would slow down, but not to that extent. So as much as I tried to say that it didn't, that shop exports and DAF hadn't had an impact on Havaka Niue Limited, it has, unfortunately. So in my efforts to help look for a bigger market, I found the Samoan buyers, and they were good enough to take the taros this time around. Unfortunately, it all depends on how much they were selling. So right now, they are struggling to sell the neo taro. I think after talking to the gentleman that took most of the taros, he said that the preference for Samoan is to take the kiritalo, the taros to the skin, not much into the frozen stuff. So that's why I went down before and I saw how much taros were there. So that's where we are. Now, due to those circumstances, sure, they paid the deposit for the taros before they take it, and out of that lot, I managed to share out what was in there, especially for at the time the Hakupu show day was on. It just so happens that they needed extra help, so of course, and of course some of the other growers around the island.
BCN News also reached out to the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries this morning, but they did not respond. Havaka Niue is one of 2 new taro exporters that started up business during the pandemic to help local growers generate some extra income with the downturn of the tourism sector. BCN News reached out to Mowi Growers, the other taro exporter based in Melbourne, Australia, but they also did not respond by the time this report was filed. It's understood that some of the local growers are owed money by both taro exporters. Brad Ignipule says that this is a very unfortunate situation, but he is doing all he can to make sure that the growers who supplied Havaka Niue Limited will be paid. He even went as far as to ask assistance from the government.
Right now, it's not through lack of trying. I've exhausted everything I have, including going to the government to seek assistance in as far as this consignment is concerned. It's only for this consignment, so I've done that, and it's just a waiting game now, unfortunately. What I've presented everything from anything to the sales from previous containers to the current situation that Havaka Niue finds itself in. At the moment, it's an unfortunate situation, and I feel for the growers.
When asked if paying $5 per kilo from the growers in a pandemic economy was an ambitious decision, Brad said that it was a very hard work growing taro and paying $5 per kilo is worth it. He said that Havaka Niue Limited has contributed more than $400,000 into the local economy since they started 2 years ago, and he is happy to help the local growers. But Havaka Niue will be streamlining their business going forward and using their own talo and a few selected growers. Ikenepule accept full responsibility for the situation they find themselves in, and that it is his promise to the growers that they will be paid by his business Havaka Niue Limited.
This situation is different from the ones in the past, but we've gone past that now. If any, it was the decision that I make to sell to the bigger markets that we find ourselves in this situation, because I was only trying to see where we are. So my message to the growers is that, and it's a promise, that however long, maybe, I will, all the farmers, all the growers will be paid. And I realize, I appreciate the time that it has taken, but listen, if I had the money, I would gladly pay all the growers at the time. So my message is, please, 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 just be patient and understand the situation that we find ourselves in. And I'm here to front. I'm not going to hide. And I'm not going to pretend that it's not an ideal situation, but this is where we are, and it's different from the beginning. So many have changed, situations have changed, and markets have changed. And so that's all I can do, and it's a promise to the growers that however long, they will be paid.
The sale of personal raffles and bingos are in breach of the existing games and gambling laws. The police department are now taking the lead in a legal awareness campaign to crack down on the illegal sale of raffles and bingos and to educate the public on the current regulations. After many years of lack of enforcement by government agencies of the current gaming and gambling laws, the problem has grown to the point where the police can no longer ignore it. The police department is hoping to address the non-compliance with the gaming and gambling fees regulations of 2005 through legal awareness and updating those regulations currently with the government lawyers before submission to Cabinet. The current law only allow incorporated society groups to sell raffles and hold bingos for the purpose of raising funds for such community activities and sports groups. But due to the lack of enforcement of the law over many years, people have mistakenly thought that it was legal to sell personal raffles and hold personal bingos. BCN News is aware of the widespread use of social media, Facebook in particular, to sell raffles, and the value of those raffles have reached thousands of dollars that the police can no longer ignore. It is not often that the media gets the opportunity to speak with Niue's High Commissioner to New Zealand during their break on the island. But we were very fortunate this week to sit down with the Honourable High Commissioner for Niue to Wellington, His Excellency Fisa Pihingia, to talk about his role as High Commissioner to New Zealand. Although not ideal, but due to the space limitations at the BCN makeshift studios, the interview was held under the shelter at the airport. Honourable Fisa Pihingia told BCN News that he is thankful to the former Premier, the late Sir Toke Talangi, for appointing him to the role 5 years ago. He is now into the second 3-year term as Niue's High Commissioner to New Zealand. BCN News was happy to get the opportunity to speak to the High Commissioner and hear his views about the role of Niue government's only diplomat working in Wellington.
Thank you to the former, the late Sir Toke Talangi for appointing me to represent Niue in Wellington, and also to promote our vision, because that's what I've been promoting in New Zealand, is our vision for a prosperous Niue. And they know that. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs also knows that our vision for a prosperous Niue, it's not just a matter of putting money in people's pocket, but the improvement of our infrastructure. If we have good infrastructure, then people feel, happy because of those infrastructure, whether it's health, education, telecommunication, and so forth. So those are the things that I'm doing in Wellington to promote those ideas that will achieve our wish, our vision to be prosperous. To be prosperous is to have good infrastructure here in Niue. And I know that our friends out there knows about it, and our friends who are coming up next month, the Ambassador of America and his team coming up, and that's the message I've been, telling them. We want good infrastructure to assist with our development. So I hope that they learn those messages and try to assist Niue with our vision.
Last week, the members of Parliament and the Whanokepule debated the merits of having another consular office in New Zealand to help with the large demands for information, such as birth certificates from Niueans living abroad. The services that is also part of the work of the Niue High Commission in Wellington. Honourable Pihingia confirmed that there is a great demand from Niueans for their birth certificates, and this can be quite overwhelming for him and his staff of One.
It is overwhelming, because some are very demanding. Some of our Niueans, they don't know, please, can you help? They just demand. But at the moment we are coping with it, but again, we need help. The office in Wellington needs support through additional worker to help out, because that's very important to me anyway as a High Commissioner and representative of the Niue government, that I look after the worker. And it's only one of her down there that works with me. And I don't want to see her, under pressure because of the demand of the work. So the demand for a PERF certificate is, it's enormous. But we can cope for the meantime, but again, I would like to see some help from our government in order to assist with those type of work. It's manual work, but still important to our community because they want it for their, when they turn 65 and once they are New Zealand superannuation, ministries want PERF certificate to, really identify and confirm. So it is very demanding, but at the moment we try to cope with it.
The Niue High Commission was established in Wellington more than 20 years ago, and while some key changes had taken place, such as the new offices and the residents, but the staff numbers hasn't changed much. Honourable Pihingia told BCN News that he is hopeful that the Public Service Commission will increase the number of staff working at the Niue High Commission in Wellington. And you can listen to a full coverage of the interview with His Excellency Fisa Pihingia on Radio Sunshine tomorrow at 9 in the morning. But in other news, New Zealand police officers Senior Sergeant Jody Lawrence and Senior Sergeant Terry Laws are this week working with the Niue Police Department as part of the New Zealand Police Pacific Island Prevention Program. Here's more on that story. The Police Pacific Island Prevention Program focuses on training and development of local police officers, community policing, prevention of crime as part of New Zealand's prevention program for the realm countries like Niue, the Cook Islands and Tokelau.
My role is to focus on 3 of the islands, which are the realm countries, which is Niue, Tokelau and Cook Islands. And under the PIP program, I have with a designer created or begun to create a program which is called Sea Talk, which is the core training of realm countries. So what this program is targeting to do is offer potential and also existing police officers in those realm countries some basics for policing. So it's not actually a recruiting package or a policing package. It's a package that's going to cover off some really good strengthening skills in terms of communications, how to be safe, how to understand basic legislation, and how to understand offences, but not at a very high legal legislative level, if that makes sense. And I think that this is something that the realm countries and certainly Chief Wilson and the rest of his team have been looking forward to. We did a presentation with them yesterday and it felt like it went well. And what we're doing, or what I'm doing for this trip, is to just consult and make sure that we're on the right track and to have some corrections and certainly some suggestions. And just to hear also what Niue needs. It's not about what New Zealand thinks Niue needs, it's about what the police service here think they need and want, and certainly want to take that into consideration in the development of the program.
A key component of preventing crime program is developing skills of local police and community engagement, as explained by Senior Sergeant Terry Laws.
It's absolutely vital and important for police services all around the world to get involved in their community as much as possible, and that's a lot of what the PIP program, or the prevention program, is all about. Getting the police out there in their communities, and traditionally police services have been sort of response driven. Something happens, they get called and they respond. But now a lot of police services are turning towards more prevention type activities. So we still respond obviously to emergencies or call outs as they're needed, but we take any opportunity to engage with the communities and prevent crime, or not just crime, it could be accidents, whatever, before they happen.
A timely visit by the New Zealand Police team after the Family Relationship Bill was finally tabled in the Whanokipule last week, which, when passed, will provide for the very first time a domestic violence law in Niue. BCN News asked the sergeants about the demands of crime and family violence.
Certainly, I think family harm is one of what we would call the drivers of demand, and I think that is unique not just to New Zealand but to any country in the world, really, because when you've got families and relationships, you're going to have issues that arise, and unfortunately we do have family harm or violence. In terms of having a point of view, I think there are many models out there in the world in terms of dealing with family harm, and I think it's important for possibly potential police officers to understand about the victim mentality, what actually creates an offender of family harm. And there's also a need, I think, to have a lot of compassion for people when there is not a lot of money, there's job pressures, there's addiction issues. It's a very complex issue that has to be dealt with a measured approach, I believe. And certainly I understand with Niue, with a small population, everyone, I imagine, knows everyone or is related, so there needs to be some real respect and tenderness, I think, with dealing with people.
Can I also just add that it's also should be looked at as not just a police problem, it is a community problem, and it needs to be a number of different departments and areas within both government, the police, social services and the community itself need to be involved. It's not just, it can never be just, if it's just going to be a police problem, it won't be solved. It really needs to be driven by the whole community. Firstly, an acceptance that it's there, and then working through the issues and how we're going to solve it, because the police will never in any country solve it by themselves. It has to be a community driven and a country-wide driven program to try and sort of assist those in need.
The New Zealand Police and Pacific Island Prevention Program continue the many years of collaboration between the Niue Police Department and New Zealand Police. Pacific media practitioners, editors, journalists and academics are this week gathered in Honiara in the Solomon Islands for the PINA Summit of 2022. And yesterday it was announced by the president of the board of PINA that Niue will host the summit in 2024. Here's more on that story. PINA's president, Corey No, announced the PINA board's decision on Thursday in the Solomon Islands. At the closing of the ceremony for the main meetings and trainings, the president of the association announced Niue's hosting of the rights. Pacific media practitioners, editors, journalists and academics have been meeting in the Solomon Islands capital Honiara this week as part of the 2022 Media Summit. Michael Jackson, editor and publisher of Niue Star, is in the Solomon Islands for the PINA Summit. The last time Niue hosted the regional group of media practitioners was some 30 years ago in the mid-1990s. And earlier this month, the Australia government's ABC, Australia Pacific Media Assistance Scheme, provided funding to help establish the first ever Niue Media Association. BCN staff, of course, are very happy to know that Niue will again host the PINA Summit. We look forward to that. And the government, in its attempt to improve the working conditions of some of the ministries, the Ministry of Infrastructure and parts of the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, the building that houses those offices is now being renovated. We spoke with the Minister of the Ministry of Infrastructure, Honourable Crosley Tatui, about the renovations project.
Yes, whilst progress is slow, but surely things are going to happen. We need to employ a private contractor to assist us with the renovation so that we can be able to achieve our goal before the year ends or well into next year. Precisely, we're talking about half or more than $500,000 for it to be completely furnished to the state we want it to be.
Minister of Infrastructure, Honourable Crosley Tatui, said that the renovations project is valued at just over $500,000 with funding from various partners, including the Ariane project, the Niue government, FFA and the New Zealand government. While the renovations are underway, the staff will be relocated to other temporary offices in Alofi. And to end our bulletin for tonight, this is a heartfelt congratulations to our news presenter and reporter, Soraya Mangaoa, who yesterday or earlier this week graduated from the University of Auckland. We wish Soraya Mangaoa and her family all the very best, and we can't wait to see her back on the island and in the job, and we will have our own celebrations here at BCN. But congratulations, Soraya, on your graduation. And that's our bulletin of BCN News for tonight. Do join us again on Tuesday next week for our bulletin in Mangahau Niue. Until then, Munui Nepo, Nona Fua.